Today, what a ceasefire can't let us forget.
You don't just hear genocidal language and turn the page on that. I just don't think that that's even a remotely normal reaction.
As the US and Iran meet to negotiate, for some, Trump's threat of destroying Iranian civilization continues to echo. I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take.
Hi, my name is Negin Owliaei. I am the editor-in-chief of Truthout. We're a social justice independent news media organization in the United States. And I'm based in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Negin, welcome back to The Take. It is really good to have you, especially on this side of the mic, because for those who are in the know, they might recognize your name from the credits. You used to be one of our senior producers and my colleague for more than a decade. You're also a friend of mine and someone I've been leaning on in the buildup and over the course of this war for a gut check of sorts. So can you tell everyone else how you've been holding up in this moment as a journalist, as a mother, as an Iranian American?
You started with the hardest question. I had the good fortune of talking to a relative in Iran for Nowruz, which is the Iranian New Year, a couple weeks ago. And I said, "How are you?" And even though I have a hard time answering that question, I can't imagine how she was feeling. And she just said, "I am." And I've been echoing that. That's how I'm holding up. It's interesting you brought in all those overlapping identities, because I feel like all of them just feel so heightened right now. I feel like we might talk about this, but this war has been so heavy on the use of artificial intelligence, and you're just seeing all kinds of videos and things that people don't know what to believe. And so for my family in the group chat, I'm like, this is true, this is not true.
So you're playing the role in your family that you play for me and some of the other journalists in our group chats.
Yes. And then also vice versa for those people in Iran who are not well-versed in what Trump's language sounds like. I'm like, unfortunately, this is actually what he has posted on the social media platform he owns. To your point about a mother, what are we doing? What world are we leaving for our kids, whether they're in Iran, whether they're in Palestine, Lebanon, the US? It's scary.
Yeah, right. So you are the editor-in-chief of Truthout, an independent news outlet that has been doing vital reporting for years, but also during the course of this war. And you wrote a really powerful op-ed after Trump posted on Truth Social that a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. Words that put the whole world on edge. You write about the moment you saw that post. What was your reaction?
I was getting my kid ready for daycare, and I just glance at my phone. I see some just remarkable thing come up on my notifications that I can't even process. I get her out the door, and then I sit on my couch and I read the entirety of what he said. And I'm maybe not the most proud of this natural reaction, but I think it was my natural reaction. Just selfishly, before I could think about people or my loved ones, all these feelings and memories of being in Tehran, being in these places that I love so much, sitting on my grandmother's balcony, looking out over the city of Tehran, those just all washed over me. And I just started sobbing. I didn't know what to believe. Trump is so, he's so fickle and so unpredictable. But when someone who has access to nuclear weapons says something like that, you stop and take notice, right?
Mm-hmm.
You imagine the worst. And when that deep, I'll never forget that moment. And then when that ended, I think I just felt just deep rage, because it was a civilization will die. What does that mean? But also, what does that say about you that you're saying this? What does it say about the rest of us that we're just watching this happen? And I think I was just overcome with anger as to how one man can make this threat and the rest of the world has to just stop and figure out what to do.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier you're kind of, my words, the interpreter in chief for members of your family who see some of Trump's statements. What did you hear from people?
I think people who have been watching The Take probably know this, but it's been incredibly difficult to get in touch with people in Iran right now. There's a severe disconnect to the international internet. And so we have this kind of this phone tree almost, where, some of my uncles will call their kids or their siblings who are in the United States, and they'll update us on how they're doing. So I haven't heard from anyone directly after that. But then their reactions just were awe-inspiring in a way. My cousin was saying, like, I heard from my dad. And I was like, what did he say? He's like, he's okay. I was like, how do you say you're okay? Like, what does that mean? She said he was going to the store and getting milk. I was like, what?
Wow.
What? Okay. And it's just like the rest of us are going about our days or just watching and feeling like this is like this apocalypse. And the people who are the most directly threatened by this news are just going on. I heard secondhand from another uncle who was like, we're not going to leave Tehran. We're not going to leave Tehran. Like, this is where we're from. This is where we live. So, I was nervous and scared for them, and also just in awe and sad, because I don't think that we use the word resilience a lot, but I don't think that's great. I don't think it's a good thing for people to be exposed to these kinds of violent threats against their person on a regular basis and then just go casually buy a gallon of milk,
Right. Well, after you take a moment to reflect, to cry, to rage, you also have a job to do, right? You are running a newsroom. What kind of new pressure has this moment brought up for you as a journalist who also has all these other identities?
I'm lucky that I think that compared to 2003, which I think this moment gets compared to a lot with the U.S. invasion of Iraq, there are more Iranian American journalists now, more Iranian journalists in general in the US or in Europe, or writing in English. So I don't feel as much immediate pressure in that sense. But one thing that kind of disturbed me a little bit is seeing how much people in the US were so focused on, what does this mean for us? Like, what does this mean for the nuclear apocalypse coming to us? And I was just like, okay, like, let's take a step back. Let's look at what Iranians have been through. People probably remember that Trump was threatening bridge and power plant day, threatening to bomb the bridges and power plants of Iran. And before that, we had seen, an attack from the U.S.-Israeli alliance on bridges. We'd already seen that kind of infrastructural attack that had been going on for weeks now. And I don't think that people necessarily were following every single detail in the United States of that. And so I feel this pressure to make sure that we are focusing on where the bombs are landing and not just what effect they might have on us. And so in that sense, like, I don't think I'm doing anything special. I think I'm just trying to be a responsible journalist. I can give you an example. Like, the New York Times on Tuesday, they had, Trump's like civilization threat on one side of their website. In the middle, they had a story about, I think, Tehran or Lebanon. I can't remember which one. And then on the other side, and it was bigger than the civilization threat, was Melania Trump's Easter outfit.
Oh,
and so,
wow.
I like the standard's pretty low, right? Like, I don't think that any journalist who is thinking about this critically would put those two things on the same scale, right? Problem is that is not something that we can take for granted in the U.S.
Wow, that's surreal. It doesn't even begin to describe it. Well, shortly before the deadline, I think a lot of us let out a collective sigh when Trump announced there would be a 2-week ceasefire. What did you feel in that moment? Is relief even the right word?
Yeah, it was such a bizarre few minutes, right? Because you have Trump release this on Truth Social, and I'm like, is this true? Like, what's Iran saying? It just felt so unbelievable to me. Like, it's so hard to tell what's going on at any given point in time. I mentioned, that this has been a war full of misinformation, disinformation. And so it was like, for a few minutes, it was like, are we just done? Like, are we just, done and dusted, like wrapped up, it's finished? And we can all go on with our lives.
Well, to that point, now we're a couple of days away from it. Are we just done? Because I don't see it leading anymore. And it almost feels like to bring it up now is, that's in the past. We're over it. He did not initiate nuclear apocalypse. Are we just done?
Exactly. I mean, no. Look at what Israel has wrought in Lebanon in the past 24 hours alone, right? And I know that JD Vance is out here saying, like, Lebanon has nothing to do with you. That's just completely untrue. The one thing that happened when Trump made that threat is that the whole world stopped and paid attention to the fact that this is a president who is threatening genocide, who is using his words to inflict this kind of psychological terror onto people. And again, I do think that part of why that resonated so much is because people were afraid for themselves. Like, people automatically, I think a lot of folks automatically just assumed he's talking about nuclear weapons. But again, like, bridges were being bombed already. People were being killed already. You had hundreds of attacks on schools and hospitals, and those didn't make headlines. This did. And so it makes me wonder, again, what are we doing when it takes a president to make this kind of a threat for people to wake up to the violence that the U.S. military is inflicting, to wake up to the violence that the Israeli military is inflicting? What does that say about us? What does that say about our civilization?
Mm-hmm. In your piece, you write about dehumanization that persists in every single aspect of American life. Is that how we got here? Because, you and I have worked together for many, many years. And the threat of the U.S. and Iran going to war has been a thing looming over our journalistic careers for years, right? So then it finally happened, and we've seen the rhetoric since. Has that rhetoric been allowed to happen because of the many years of dehumanization?
I 100% think so. I don't think you can look at where we are right now without looking at the decades and decades of violent talk that have been put upon Iranians and in Iran, upon Iranian Americans. Even after Trump issued his threat, we saw Republican lawmakers going on TV and talking about how Iran is a cancer.
Iran's like a cancer, and sometimes the cure to cancer hurts, but the cancer has to be eliminated, and that cancer is Iran.
Sadly, we have seen people who are Iranian say that things like sanctions are a form of chemotherapy. It's just such a bizarre way to talk about people in another country, and I don't think that we would have gotten to this point if we had properly valued the lives of people in the Middle East. I just don't think we would have gotten to that point. And there's a dehumanization against Iranians, of course, but again, you can't talk about this and divorce it from what's happened in Gaza, the Israeli genocide in Gaza, right? I mean, we have seen over and over again that the powers that be are not intervening, they're not doing anything. We've seen people come out and protest. We've seen all kinds of actions for sanctions, for boycotts, for divestment. We've seen the people who are calling for those things get brutally repressed on their college campuses, in the streets, across the world. And so it's a fact of life, I think, that the way that people who are in power in the U.S. act devalues the lives of people in the Middle East. And it's been going on for decades and decades.
So then let's talk about the people we elect to make change. Because since Trump made that threat, a number of U.S. Democratic Congress members did condemn the posts. Some even called to invoke the 25th Amendment, which would allow the vice president and cabinet to impeach and remove the president from office. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying that this still needs to happen. It is not over. He still made those threats and he still should be impeached. Has the reaction you've seen from political leaders in the U.S. met the moment?
No, not even remotely. On Tuesday, the reaction that we saw from people in the U.S. was, this person is a madman. Trump is a specifically dangerous person. I think that was a sentiment that was broadly expressed and aired on media outlets by politicos. Not all of them, certainly, but some of them, the ones who deigned to push back. That's true. I do think that Trump is a particularly dangerous person. I don't think that every single person who has a bone to pick with Iran is going to threaten to annihilate the entire civilization. That's a uniquely cruel thing to do, right? At the same time, I kept thinking back to Yoav Gallant's words after October 7th, saying that, they were fighting human animals. And I think we should remember that Trump in an earlier post had said, they're animals, when he was talking about Iranians. And look what happened. There was not accountability, and look what happened in Gaza. Look at the genocide that we saw perpetrated by Israel in Gaza. You don't just hear genocidal language and turn the page on that. I just don't think that that's even a remotely normal reaction. And it's been bizarre watching some of the kind of the sports metaphor type punditry happening. Well, Democrats don't want to appear weak, blah, blah, blah. It's do you not care about your own moral core? Do you not worry about what's happening to you and your own heart if it gets hardened to threats of genocide? I don't know what to do with those people. I don't know what to do with people who think that that's something that you can just simply work with. I think that's a huge problem. And Malika, you pointed out, like, how many episodes of various shows have you and I done about Iran deal, U.S.-Iran tensions, et cetera, like dozens. I think people forget that when U.S. President Barack Obama signed the nuclear deal with Iran, Democrats, there was a huge contingent of Democrats that actually tried to torpedo it, right? Among them, Chuck Schumer, who is the Senate Minority Leader right now. You've seen, since Trump didn't follow through on his civilization threat, you've actually seen some Democrats, I'm thinking of Schumer again, I'm thinking of Chris Murphy, say things like, Iran isn't defeated. I'm like, what do you want to happen? What's your ideal scenario here? Like, this war continues on. We continue to bomb people with no end in sight. And for what? Like, what are you trying to get out of this? Democrats never really push back on the war in a moral sense, right? I think that that's a huge problem. So we'll see where it lands people, but you can see that people are not happy about that. Like, I genuinely think that that's not going to fly for much longer.
Okay, so you mentioned Chuck Schumer and some of the Democrats, and I think there can be a tendency, at least in the U.S., to think, okay, well, this is being done under a Republican administration. It's the Republicans, and the midterms are going to come, and, they may or may not be voted out. But when it comes to this issue in particular, when it comes to Iran, I'm thinking of taco. If you can explain what that means, because I've seen it a lot on social media, but it sort of seems like the Democrats right now are taunting Trump because he didn't go through with his threat to end civilization by saying, look, he's weak. And they're using the word taco to describe that. Can you explain?
Taco. The phrase taco that Democrats are using, it stands for Trump always chickens out. You saw Chuck Schumer bring this up in June 2025 when the U.S. bombed Iran for the first time. Basically asked, like, why did you stop there? So again, if any party that wants to be an actual opposition needs to offer actual opposition. So you can't just say, you didn't ask us permission, and then when there's a sign of a war ending, say, no, go harder. Like, what's your message? Like, what is the objective that you're trying to achieve here? The objective I'm trying to achieve is that we don't go to war. We don't go to war at all. We don't bomb people. The U.S. military machine is so overblown. It is so wildly expensive. It is putting so much of the capacity of this incredibly wealthy country toward killing kids. Like, I just think that's bad. Like, I think that an opposition party should be saying that. Like, I think that should be a winning message in my mind, So even on a selfish level, Democrats could think about it that way. But also just on, again, a moral level. The first main action we saw from this war was bombing an elementary school. Like, what are we doing? Like, what is the point? Why do you not start there? Like, why do you talk about taco? Like, that's just, it's repugnant to me, honestly.
Yeah. Well, earlier you said this is a moment to reflect on our civilization. And in your op-ed, you wrote, I've spent my entire adult life attempting to make sense of and document the violence inherent to the U.S. war machine. So picking up on what you were just saying, what do you think we as Americans need to confront about the U.S.'s role in the world?
Oh, what a question. I mean, I know my personal thoughts about it, right? And I'm a journalist, and I don't want to prescribe the answer to different people. But I think we need to ask ourselves some questions at the very least. Like, what is the U.S. military doing? What is the U.S. military doing that's been good and helpful? What has it done to preserve life? I mean, I came of age at a time when we were watching the U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq. We were watching what happened in Afghanistan, the U.S. invasion there. Decades of military adventurism that just led to massive loss of life, that led to just mass migration of people trying to flee just such deep harms, that has completely ruined environments, that has been so environmentally poisonous that has led to kids being born with birth defects, I want to denounce that. Like, I don't want that to be done in my name. I don't want that to be done with my money. I don't know how many people do want that to be done with their name, and with their money. But I think we should ask, we should start there and figure out what do we actually want to be done.
Yeah. Leave it to a journalist to not to give their opinion, but to, the questions we all need to be thinking of as we interrogate that for ourselves. Well, finally, Negin, I wonder what you want people to know about the Iranian civilization, because there's a line in your piece that really stuck with me. And you write, our culture, our heritage, our pride, and resisting the boot of imperialism and injustice. This is what I associate with Iranian civilization. What do outsiders miss when they look at Iran through the lens of just war?
So this is maybe still through the lens of war, but I think when I was writing that, I was watching a power plant outside of Tehran, where Ali Gamsari, who's a renowned tar player and composer, was staging a sit-in. And I think people around the world probably have seen this. And I was watching the reaction of people online saying, why is he doing this? Like, his life could be threatened, and not understanding that, like, clearly he knew that, and that was part of the point. And it really reverberated. You saw people coming out onto bridges. I mean, throughout this entire war, you've seen people trying to live their lives, right? That demonstrates what I mean. I'm not talking about necessarily like a state or, like a government or anything, but just people who manage to find dignity in life despite having these horrors inflicted on them from everywhere, from every single angle. I think that's something beautiful, and it's something we should aspire to. I remember being a kid, and I would go to Iran for summers and winter breaks, and I would journal. And there was one day I just like remember thinking I would walk and I would get this loaf of bread from this local bakery, and it was just so good and so fresh, and you could see the person who was making it. And I thought, it's really beautiful to be able to interact with people who are doing everything in your life, right? In a way that I think maybe people in the US feel kind of divorced from. You go to a supermarket, you buy a loaf of Sara Lee or whatever. It's not quite the same. And there's just an image that has stuck with me and will always stick with me from this war. There's so many, but one in particular, I don't know if your listeners have seen it, but it's one of this child in the Iranian province of Hormozgan. They're on a swing, and you can see bombs in the background. They're on this like swing over the water, and I'm just like, whenever I see that, I'm like, what right do I ever have to complain about anything? I just think I want to devote what I can do to making sure this kid gets to just swing like that, and there won't be this like toxic pollution. There won't be this bombardment in the background. And I don't want to be nationalist about it, right? I think like there's so many other countries, there's so many other peoples that have this tendency, this kind of resilience. And I don't want to romanticize war at all either. It's been hellish, I know. But like this is what it is. It's people who have suffered, through decades of punishing sanctions, who went through a revolution and then 8 years of war and then sanctions, repression internally, and they just go get a gallon of milk like it's nothing.
Negin, thank you for giving us a window into what this has been like. I really appreciate it. It's a tough task, but a necessary one. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.